Welcome back to Club Talk. We're going to stick with football here, but just a reminder for anyone who hasn't already, click on to subscribe to the page just there on YouTube, just so you don't miss any further videos coming up. Fintan O'Toole to 42. We'll start in your home county Cork. Do hello against Nemo Rangers. So they've met 14 times in the championship before. Nemo have won 7, Do hello 5 and 2 draws. So I'd say people outside would just assume Nemo are going to win this, but the divisional team are fairly strong.
Yeah, they are very strong. I think the Nemo manager kind of put it well the other day when he was saying, you know, in the last couple of games they've played against club teams who may have had one Cork senior panellist, but pretty much all of the 6 starting Do hello forwards have played for Cork in either minor, junior, under 20 or senior over the last couple of years. Like Donnacha O'Connor is probably the most recognisable name to people. Amazing that he's still so prominent for them. I mean, he's 38.
Is he 38?
But I think anyone who kind of saw him the last couple of years, he wasn't a guy who was retiring when he was retiring for Cork that his form had kind of dipped. He was still playing really well. I mean, I think at the Mayo game in 2017, you know, he was still really, really strong. And I know it's a big personal thing for him to try and win this championship, because a lot of these players would have grown up, like Do hello won 2 back-to-back in 89 and 90, and they would have kind of heard, you know, guys from their clubs would have been part of that divisional team, and then they lost
3 finals, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose and a couple of really tough ones. 2012 they lost the last minute goal from Castlehaven, lost by a point. Very dour, low scoring game. Last year's final was a brilliant one, really high scoring, probably just a bit too open, and the Bears, which was a great story at the time because they hadn't won it in so long, beat them by a goal. But to come back this year, like they've added 2 or 3 guys who would have been on the Cork under 20 team that won the All Ireland. So on paper they have a really, really strong squad. Nemo obviously similarly very, very strong. Like they've both been really prominent over the last couple of years, but never actually met in a final. Kind of met, you know, in a couple of semi-finals and all that. So it has a lot of potential. It's a live game with TG Carr, so hopefully it'll be a good one.
Do you think that Club All Ireland loss and the manner of it to Corofin in 2018 would have affected Nemo going into last year's championship that the Bears eventually won?
Yeah, I think it's obviously a factor, especially the way they lost it.
It was over
because and especially because they'd had such a great semi-final win. You know, you beaten Schlockneil, like you weren't beating just any old team in the semi-final, and they'd won it after extra time, and it just felt like they were coming into a really good place. But yeah, they were just, you know, completely off the pace. That like Corofin have just taken it to a whole new standard. And then I suppose you look at what Corofin did to Dr. Crokes then this year, and you're maybe wondering, are they just at a different level over the last couple of years than anyone else? That was a bit of a freak result for Nemo then. Like they only scored 4 points against Castlehaven, like, so it was a big surprise. But the team has changed a good bit since that All Ireland club team. I mean, you think like Tomás O'Shea's not involved anymore. Paddy Gumley, who came into it from Cavan, was involved. Like they have a very strong player in midfield this year who's come into the frame, James McDermott. So basically he's a doctor based in Cork from Roscommon, was on the Roscommon panel a few years ago. He basically just moved down to Cork, kind of got in touch with Paul Kerrigan last year, but kind of maybe just training away with the club. He was still playing Roscommon Gales, his home club, and he decided to make the move down. And he was talking during the week basically about playing the county, I think it was the quarter-final, and he came out, they had won their game, and Roscommon Gales were obviously in the county, or sorry, it was the county semi-final, after Nemo beating Douglas, and he came out and he was like looking on his phone because Roscommon Gales were in the county final that day. So he was saying it was kind of a strange experience, but he's been a really, really strong addition for them, giving them a good platform in midfield. And they still have a lot of guys with county experience, you know, say Paul Kerrigan, Luke Conley, Barry O'Driscoll's played there recently, and they also have the winning experience. A lot of these guys have a lot of medals under their belt. And
you mentioned Paul Kerrigan, who scored 310 in the championship so far this year. He's played in 10 finals, I think, since coming on board in 2004. He's only lost 1, a couple of draws in there. That's some going. The Nemo manager, Paul O'Donovan, he said, and he was talking about this both in terms of the club hurling championship last week, which was won by Immakilly, another divisional side, and he was saying, I prefer to see club teams win it. That's my own feeling. I've always felt that way. I'd like to see it as a club championship. I prefer to see the Glen last week, and he was down there hoping that they'd win. What's your thoughts on the divisional side? This comes up regularly now.
I suppose being from Cork, I'm just so used to it. Like, you know, it's something you've kind of grown up with, and you know, like the Do hello concept. I mean, they would have been traditionally just a division with junior and intermediate clubs. There was no real senior club in the division. Like Kishcame have kind of over the last couple of years have gone up to senior, but before that, for a number of years, this was the only out for players. So it'd be the northwest of the county, basically. It'd be kind of going towards the Kerry border would be the main part of it. So it's a big thing for them, you know. Cousin of mine's involved in the panel with them, and then he's one of kind of 5 or 6 players. They have a county intermediate final then the following week with their club Knocknagree, and it's a really, really big thing for them, you know. It's a chance for them to play senior. I suppose we spoke with, say, Seamus Harnedy last week. that Imokilly provides him with an outlet to play senior.
Paddy O'Sullivan was an interesting one.
Yeah, so like he would have lost 3 county senior hurling finals as a teenager with his club, and he's come back kind of late 20s, early 30s, and he's managed to win 3 in a row with his division. I can understand how people outside of the county maybe can't understand it, because you take I think Anthony Daly was talking about this in the Examiner last week, that I suppose the hurling pocket of Clare is so small that clubs are on their own. But I think Cork is so big, and geographically, and Kerry as well is so big, that I think it kind of makes sense when there's so many kind of small clubs from small areas, they can kind of come together and play at senior level. But in fairness to Paul O'Donovan, I can understand his point. I mean, the majority of people would kind of feel that way. But I do think there's an element on Sunday, because Duhallow haven't won it, and I think particularly I'd say there's a good few neutrals in Cork would maybe like to see someone like Donald O'Connor, who's kind of one of those really kind of beloved county players, maybe him to finally get his county senior medal.
Duhallow had 5 clubs out last weekend, and Knocknagree are the only ones still going. I would be thinking though, and this is another outsider looking in, where you're not used to the divisional setup, that if that player you're talking about gets injured and misses the final for Knocknagree, that people in the town would be quite frustrated at the divisional team.
I think, well, in that particular instance, say the Knocknagree manager was actually the manager of the Duhallow team that won the counties in 89 and 90. So it'd just be kind of ingrained in their culture. I think it's kind of a risk that they take. I suppose they probably view it as like it's a good thing complaint to have, that they're kind of double jobbing at the moment. But it's very different this year. Most of their clubs were kind of knocked out early last year, so Duhallow was kind of their sole focus, and their managers talked about that. This year it's been very different. Like, they had 3 clubs in the semi-finals of intermediate football. As you said, Kanturk, so that'd be Aidan Walsh's club, were in the Premier Intermediate football. So it has been a pretty hectic schedule for them of late. So maybe that might tell against them on Sunday. The flip side is that I do think their panel is a bit stronger this year. Like with the 3 or 4 guys I said that have come through from the Cork under 20 team that won the All-Ireland in August.
Yeah, the manager, Padraig Kearns, was telling journalist Michael Moynihan, last year we played Castlehaven in 3 games in the semi-final, Sunday after Sunday, and then went straight to the final. This year we've 2 weeks to prepare, so hopefully we're better prepared this time around. Can you call it?
I think I'd probably just stick with Nemo on the basis that, I mean, they've beaten the reigning champions St Finbarrs in the quarter-final, and they looked really impressive against Douglas. But it's a very, very slight fancy, and maybe, I suppose, I know the point he's making about Castlehaven, they played 3 games last year. The flip side is that so many of their players were in action last week at different teams, but I think it's great potential. I mean, a couple of the quarterfinals of the last couple of years have been very disappointing. Last year's was the first in a long time that was actually quite entertaining to watch. So hopefully we'll get a good game on Sunday. Yeah,
so the Kerry semi-finals are on this weekend. Dr. Crokes against South Kerry and St Brendan's against East Kerry. Sure, we all just can't wait to see David Clifford.
Yeah, and I suppose it'd be great. I suppose Dr. Crokes and East Kerry are probably the favourites, and that would set up a very interesting final, and that basically Dr. Crokes will be playing in the final against all the clubs that are kind of around them in the east side of the county. Okay. But I mean, let's say take the first one, St Brendan's East Kerry. East Kerry's form, given the way they played against Dingle, it's completely new for St Brendan's to be at this stage of the competition. So Jack Barry and Diarmuid O'Connor probably the most recognisable guys for people. They were kind of based around the Tralee area, kind of 5 or 6 junior clubs and intermediate clubs from around there. But I think East Kerry will have to be fancied here. They got to the semi last year. You'd imagine, not just David Clifford. I think the support cast, if we're to call it that, is very strong. Yeah, his brother. Yeah, Jack Sherwood. I think it was Jack Sherwood's form for East Kerry last year brought him into the frame for Kerry this year, and
he was getting a small bit of criticism for his performance and on TV the last day. I actually thought he did quite well, but he was definitely getting a small bit of criticism.
Yeah, I think he's a very prominent player for them. I mean, even you look at the contributions he made off the bench in a couple of games with Kerry this year, particularly the All-Ireland semi-final against Tyrone. So I'd expect East Kerry, will be favoured to win that. And then the second game, then Dr. Crokes always kind of found it tough against South Kerry. I know they're the champions and the favourites and all that. They only beat them by a couple of points a couple of years ago. Still a lot of big names in that South Kerry team. Brian Sheehan, Killian Young still there, Mark Griffin, Graham O'Sullivan, probably a younger Kerry senior. Sheehan in particular, I think, like you mentioned Paul Kerrigan's kind of record in Cork Championship earlier. There's kind of an argument in Kerry that basically Sheehan has probably been the best club footballer in the county over the last 10 to 15 years.
How many weeks? Remember a couple of years ago he was going, was it 18 weeks?
Yeah, in 2015 when he captained them to win it, and he was just outstanding for them, and his club were still going at the same time. And I mean, he was a big player in the noughties when they're winning, I think, 3 or 4 counties, and he's still Like there was a video a couple of weeks ago. I know, did you see it went up after a quarter final?
This will have to be a free now.
Basically a free in Austin Park, but it just shows how, like, you know, a gale is blowing and he just positions the ball well right to the post and then it curls in, and he's still really, really important for them. But
he'd have to rank among the best free takers going, wouldn't he?
I think he has to. Yeah. He did a brilliant interview. Actually, I think it was before the Ireland final this year in the Examiner with Kieran Shannon, basically just talking about, kind of went into a good bit of detail about his free taking style and about kind of, I suppose, learning from Maurice Fitzgerald and all that over the years, you know. So he'll be very prominent, but, you know, I think it'll be Dr. Croke's Kerry final, which would be a great pairing.
Tony Brosnan will be on fire as usual.
Yeah, and like, I suppose that's the thing, that you think of probably the riches that Kerry have in terms of attackers, that like David Clifford has obviously talked about, and, you know, there's so many options in their forward line. You know, Paul Ganey was really good this year, and Sean O'Shea, someone like Brosnan can't get a look in. And a lot of people would say that he probably should maybe come back into the frame now. He was there a couple of years ago.
Well, it's kind of the same when you look at the Dublin Football Championship recently, and we're all waxing lyrical about Collie Basquel and Conor McHugh. The Dublin football semi-finals are on this weekend, and it's a Southside spectacular because Thomas Davis against Kilmurry-Ibrickane is followed up by St. Jude's against Ballyboden. Like Thomas Davis, they only got promotion from the second tier in 2018. Now, to be fair, I would say there's an awful lot of teams that are in kind of Senior B in Dublin, so it's 16 teams and 16 teams. A lot of the teams at the top end of Senior B that would be very much of a muchness with the lower end of Senior A. So I don't know if it's a massive shock, because you'd see the likes of Clontarf and Castleknock come up from the second tier to get very far and even get towards finals.
Well, doesn't this kind of prove that the change was a good one? You know, because like there was a couple of years ago, like just looking at Dublin Championship, some of the first round games were absolute mismatches. You know, I think Kilmurry put 10 goals on, I think it might have been Aaron's Isle one year, and they changed it to kind of the 4 groups of 4 stage.
Yeah, the straight knockout thing was insane.
Yeah, and it wasn't really working, and I think this is proof when you see some of the Senior 2 teams how, I suppose, you know, we talk about tier championship at a wider county level, but maybe this is kind of it shows at club level, teams kind of working their way up, but they're definitely, I suppose, the kind of surprise package to kind of come through out of the last 4, because you look at the other 3 teams, they've either won the title or, in Jude's case, been in a couple of finals over the last few years. Thomas Davis have kind of come a little bit out of nowhere, and the big thing is that you look at it, there are no real recognisable names.
Yeah, and I was going through the team and I was like, who of these players would people know? And like the goals that they got in the last round against Castleknock, Rowan Kirby, Kieran Farley and Brendan Kirby, I'm sure they're well known in the area, but in a wider sense they're a bit of an unknown quantity. Yeah,
it's unusual for a team to reach the Dublin semi-final without a senior panelist. When you look at the teams, I mean, there the last couple of years, like, you know, Vincent's and Ballymun and Castleknock, along with the other 3 teams that we said, but it kind of also probably speaks to, a lot of people would say, like, the quality of Dublin club football. Like, you know, if you're playing at Division 1, Division 2 in the league, or you're competing at Senior 1, you mightn't be winning championships or titles, but you're still playing at a seriously high standard, and you have players of a really, really good calibre.
I think the level of competition in Dublin club football is insane compared to other parts of the country. And like, even if you look at that game between Thomas Davis and Castleknock, the Limerick forward Seamus O'Farrell, he's on the bench for Castleknock. Now they've Thomas McDaniels from Westmeath in the team, so their depth is bolstered by country players.
I think Kevin Dias has been a sub, hasn't he, for Kilmurry over the last couple of years as well. At times,
it's just kind of, it's nuts. So St. Jude's against Ballyboden, I saw it being tipped up as the Dodder Derby. 2015 champions Boden went on to win the All Ireland, of course, against last year's beaten finalist St. Jude's. They're kind of the perennial nearly man, aren't they, Jude's, in recent times? 2009, 2018, losing finals. And
the hurling wing of the club has come short a couple of times as well. Like, so they've been challenging. They've been challenging really strongly over the last decade. You know, I remember being at last year's final. I think it was Paul Mannion kind of caught fire, and they never, like, they looked like they needed a goal to kind of get going, but they never really kind of got it. But I mean, like, they have a lot of really, really good players. Like, aside from Kevin McMenamin is probably the stand out to the wider audience, you know, but there's Niall Coakley from Cork's been really good, Padraig Clark of Sligo, Tom Lahiff in defence. You know, they have a lot of guys that have been kind of around there a long time, just kind of maybe need that I suppose kind of big scalp to get over. But I mean, it was Vincent's, wasn't it, that they beat in the quarter final. So I mean, that's surely got to be a big boost for them, you know, to kind of to get them going into this.
Vincent's looked to have taken a serious downturn after so much success. Probably all those main players at the same time are probably hitting the wrong age.
Maybe it doesn't look like is there another wave coming to kind of push them on again?
Well, it's hard to get another wave of that calibre, isn't it?
Absolutely. Whereas like Ballyboden do look maybe like they have that, you know, with the kind of Basquel is really, really prominent for them, and obviously get knocked out of their hurling now, they would have a good few dual players, maybe more than most clubs. Probably give them a good few options for is it Anthony Rainbow's in charge of them now this year?
Yeah, and I was looking back at when Bowden played Jude in the county final before 10 years ago. Kevin McManaman would have been playing. Conal Keeney, I think, played well that day, and of course he got injured. He seemed to pop his calf or his hamstring as he'd come on in extra time and popped it. But that time that Bowden beat Jude's in the final in 09, they had 2 replays against Crokes in the semi-final and then a 5-day turnaround for the final.
They still managed to do it.
Yeah, it's still nuts. Like, there's still plenty of that going on around the club calendar.
I think that there's probably a bit less now, isn't there, because of the...
We're going to come to one.
But do you remember a few years ago it felt like there was about 9 or 10 cases, you know. Thankfully it seems to have lessened, but I know you were referencing earlier there's as we're going to discuss one as well.
We have a little something coming. But anyway, first of all, we go into the Leinster Club first round this weekend. Forban of Offaly against St Patrick's of Wicklow. I'd say the main thing here is, can Keane Johnson be stopped after what he did against Rode?
Yeah, that's probably the big one. You know, I think there was some stat about his shot conversion ratio between the quarter, semi and final, you know, was superb. And it kind of just shows, what an asset he would have been probably to the Offaly senior side over the last couple of years, you know, kind of focusing on the under 20 side. I suppose it's just a bit of a novel one, the fact that Forban have come out of it, because we're so used to seeing Rode kind of flying the flag for Offaly. And I suppose the interesting one is that you win it after 25 years of county. It's kind of unprecedented for all these players. You know, it's a difficult one. You know, what's next? Like, you know, do we get back up? At least they've had 2 weeks. I think the difficult one will be if you're out the week after. Like, you know, as regards how much players can kind of mentally get back up for or get ready for something completely new and a different challenge.
St. Pat's needed, I think they needed a replay certainly in the semi-final. Remember the abandoned shootout. So they've done the 2 in a row now, so they'll know from last year how to prepare themselves for the first round of Leinster. But last year they got absolutely pasted by Rode, who Forban have beaten. So ergo,
you find over a couple of times in these Leinster early games that there can be massive gulfs between county champions coming out of some counties. I think it was a couple of years ago the Meath champions won very convincingly against the Wexford champions. I can't remember who it was now, but these are the results you find that they can happen in the first round, so it's kind of hard to kind of put a form guide, you know, gauge it. Like, I know
teams themselves probably don't know.
No, it's completely unknown.
Gary Castle of Westmeath against Killoe, Emmett Ogue of Longford. Bit of a 50-50 game. Neither have been in Leinster for a while. Yeah,
at least in this case though, they both have been there, and they have. I know the teams have kind of changed a little bit, but they still, like, obviously Gary Castle got to an All-Ireland final, and Killoe were there for a couple of years. They ran Vincent's Close once. I think in a semi-final.
And these teams met in 2014 when I think there was a bit of controversy at the end. Desi Dolan hit a winner, but then Mickey Quinn hit a 46-metre free wide that would have forced extra time. But someone else was telling me then that there was a high ball last kick of the game, ended up in the net, but the referee gave a free out and nobody knows why. It's
kind of similar to the Derry final last Sunday, bit of controversy with a late ball going in. You'd imagine both of these cases though, because they have that experience of winning county, that they'll be looking to push on in Leinster, and especially I'd say Killoe, when they've seen what Munlochta have done last year, there's definitely got to be a big kind of a drive there, like to have a go off the province.
Yeah, Daniel Mimna, I think, is the guy that Gary Castle will want to stop, man of the match in the Longford final, and just like a piston engine running up and down the field. So it'll be an interesting game. Éire of Carlow against Castletown of Wexford. So Éire pasted Palatine in the Carlow final, 116 to 5 points. Chris Blake scored 6. Niall Quinlivan came off the bench for 4. It was Castletown's first Wexford title since 2010 against Gus Ran. There was about nearly 4,000 there, which isn't bad for a Wexford football final.
But that's an incredibly competitive championship if you ever look at it. The different teams that win it kind of every decade, and there's big interest down there in it.
Yeah, the veterans James Holmes and Colin Morris, who people will probably remember from the Wexford county team, Anthony Masterson in goal. Do you remember one time he had a tweet? I think his father's tractor was stolen, and he put out one of these tweets.
Right.
Yeah, we're going to fight. Very, very angry sort of tweet over it. Anyway, I'm not sure if it was quite like Larry Corbett when he said, "I'll find you." And Bar was had something taken from it. Anyway, we'll come to a ridiculous situation in the Leinster Intermediate Football Championship. So Kildavin Clonagall are playing O'Hanlon's in the Carlow football final tonight, which is Friday night, and of course they will then play the winner of the Longford Intermediate title, Father Manning Gales, on Sunday. You'd swear Carlow were knocked out of the All-Ireland Inter-County a month before Longford, and here we are.
Yeah, not familiar with this now. So is this a hold up due to hurling?
I think there would have been
sister
a game
clubs
or two cancelled. There would have been clashes. Like for example, the situation where you had Ballinkillen guys who play football with a different club. That sort of situation. Yeah. But come on, like you've had so many months at this stage.
It just, I don't know, it's kind of inexcusable really that a situation like that develops in a county like that's knocked out so far. Like I think we referenced when we were chatting earlier in the week about the Tip in 2014 when they went on to Stephen's Day, but they were in the hurling final replaying at a massive amount of dual clubs, and it's a big county as well with county championships. Carlow don't really have that excuse, and like I was saying earlier, I suppose you'd be hoping that this was the kind of thing, the scenarios that was gone, because that's absolutely crazy. I mean, for who wins as well, like, what do you do like tonight? Do you celebrate it? Do you try, like, if you're a manager, do you go in and say, lads, let's hold off and have a cut off Sunday?
Yeah,
it's just so difficult.
Like, it's a county title. So you have to be able to celebrate it.
Yeah.
And like when you do win your first one, and I'm not sure what to be fair, O'Hanlon's were Leinster senior club champions back in 2000.
Yeah, and they've kind of seen their rogue, their Carlos and rivals kind of come back on top and take over. Yeah.
Kilmurry, actually, I have to say they've had some brilliant player profiles out in the last couple of weeks.
All right.
Very tongue in cheek. I actually collect them for this, but keep an eye out for them. They're very good. The venue actually has been changed from Dr. Cullen Park to Fina. I would imagine they're worried about the pitch or something like that.
Yeah, but I think there's 2 games there Sunday. Maybe it's related to that. Is it the Aero Carlow are playing there on? Aero Carlow playing there on Sunday in the first one, Leinster Club. Maybe it's linked to that.
Okay, and the Leinster junior football. This is an interesting one to talk about. It's on in Abbottstown. Berlin are against Keena St Dominic's of Longford. So I was doing a bit of reading up on this. John Harrington had a piece, and he was saying that they're the European senior champions. They beat Belgium in the final, Luxembourg in the semi-final, 21-man panel including 10 non-Irish. And they were only founded 5 years ago by a Kerry man, Christopher Hennessy, who sadly passed away due to cancer last year. But like the logistics, they train together on sort of this patchy pitch at the closed Tempelhof airport. It's kind of funny, like this stuff is going on all around the world and people don't even, obviously don't realise it.
Because I suppose when you think of GAA abroad, everyone's kind of on, I think someday like of Australia and America. Mainland Europe doesn't probably get this, or England I suppose is obviously the other big one. Teams in London that you probably don't think of kind of these different European capital cities of a tribe. Well, maybe think of it, but just as a kind of a social pursuit and something very casual as opposed to actually playing at this sort of a level and coming through to
competitive outlet. And you want somewhere to project it. I remember in Toronto, I trained for a little while. I actually ended up leaving Toronto early and going to New York for the summer. But I trained with a club, St. Vincent's in Toronto, and it was an absolute voyage just to get out to where we were training, which was at the back of a school, a soccer field, rock hard, might as well have been in the car park. But you're still out there trying to knock the head out of whoever's beside you. So they have a twinning arrangement with Ballyboden, so they're going to use, I think Ballyboden are putting them up and letting them use their facilities to kind of have a stretch out before they head off to Abbottstown. But Keena have former Longford footballer Shane Doyle and Rory Connor, so they'll surely fancy themselves.
Yeah, you'd imagine so, but it's it's a brilliant story, isn't it? Like, and that twin arrangement is very interesting. I don't know what the link is there, but that's, like, you hear these stories of like teams having to go abroad, and it's kind of the logistics of, like, even an Irish club having to go over to England for an All-Ireland qualifying or something like that, and there's a problem with the bus or something like that, like, so that's obviously got to take a lot of the kind of planning headaches out of it, that they have that set up.
Yeah, and they'd never even taken part in a 15-side competition. They were doing 11-a-side up until this year, so that's unbelievable progress for Berlin. The Clare football final replay is on this weekend. Kilmurry-Ibrickane and Miltown-Malbay. I saw Owen Brennan writing that they had waited 132 years for this final between the neighbours, and now 2 in the space of a week. 0-9 apiece, level 5 times, so it's as tight as a nut.
Yeah, this is a really novel thing because there's such a massive rivalry in West Clare football. I mean, Clare is so kind of almost divided down the middle between East and West in terms of hurling and football, and the Western clubs develop really, really big. It shows really, really big rivalries. The fact that they've won the last 4 titles between them, but hadn't actually met each other in a final, and as you said, it was kind of 9 points apiece last week. There was very little between them. That's kind of does tend to happen, doesn't it, at times with these sort of games? There's so much build up locally to them, can't get a shouted attention. So you wonder, will it maybe be a bit of a more free flowing affair on Sunday? And that was the order of the day last week, wasn't it? With the Donegal final was the same, very low score in a drawn game. Draw as well in Kildare, maybe probably a bit more scores than that one in Newbridge, and the 3 replays on this Sunday. Yeah,
some of the main men for Miltown, that'll be Gordon Kelly, people would have seen with Clare, Conor Cleary, Owen Cleary, his twin, Cormac Murray as well. Kilmurry-Ibrickane, Dermot Coughlin, Keelan Sexton, very dangerous player. Ian McCarthy, Shane Hickey. So Aidan McCarthy hurls with Aina Kilnamona and could be Mark and Conor Cleary, who hurls with Kilmaley, and they were both starting against Cork this year. So
it's very interesting because there's a guy, Aidan McGuan, playing for Miltown, who hurls with Aina Kilnamona. So like they're kind of just in mid-Clare, so it's a hurling only club. And then you see a lot of guys, you see it as well with Ballyea, where like a lot of guys who play football in West Clare play hurling, so you kind of play with the nearest club, so you kind of have free reign, I suppose, whatever you've the link to.
Because they could be 30 or 40 miles away.
Yeah, and I remember chatting to Owen Cleary about this before, and he basically said that like they grew up in Milton, but their parents encouraged them to play whatever sport they wanted, and they used to bring them to Kilmaley to play hurling, and Conor obviously was very, very proficient at it, went to St. Flannan's, and he's forged his path as a Clare senior hurler, while Owen has kind of gone down the football route.
Makes you wonder about great twins out there, so I threw that on Twitter, and Joe Troy came back with the two Helians of Kilcormac, and then he actually mentioned Peter and Thomas Garrity. Not too many teams with two sets of identical twins.
Yeah, and they all played in All-Ireland club final together not too long ago,
Sean and Michael Cleary of Shinrone. Tom Flynn came back and said Thomas and Morris O'Gorman of the Nair 4 Mile Water and Waterford, and they also represented Munster. Keith Joyce said Patrick and Cathal Sweeney of Killinan and is it Killannon?
Killannon, yeah, that'd be Kev Walsh's club, and both would have played senior football recently.
Yeah, James Mulqueen said Alan and Paul Flynn of Kildangan, who'll be in the Tip Hurling final next week. David Kent said the McGoverns for Meath and Donna Ashbourne, and Tom O'Connor added that the Ryan twins for Meath as well. And Kevin Egan came in with presumably the most high profile this weekend will be Louise and Nicola Ward playing in the Connacht Senior Club final on Sunday for Kilkerran Clonburn. He thinks both intercounty players, and he said he's coming in with a lot of half truths here and so some suggestions. Not sure. I think Nicola missed some of the year with injury. So we'll move on to the Donegal final this weekend. It's another replay, 8 points apiece between Guido against Niamh Cunliffe, often referred to as Glenties. Very, very tight again, and like Owen McGettigan scored 4 frees for Glenties. Kieran Thompson levelled it with a 45 laid on. Just another example of these county finals are so tight. Yeah, and that was probably a bit disappointing because I would have watched Guido's semi-final. It was at the OurGame on a couple of weeks ago, and they got 3 goals against Kilcairn. It was it was a really good game, a lot of really high quality players in action. And this was the live game last Sunday, so you're kind of hoping for a good match. It was exciting towards the end, as these games can be, when everything's still up for grabs. But there wasn't really much. Neither defence was really yielding much when it came to it. So it'll be interesting to see who kind of learns, and whoever wins, then they don't have really much time to turn around. You've Castleratton of Cavan waiting in the Ulster quarter final the following Sunday, so it's going to be pretty hectic. But they're both very experienced. I mean, they're both, Guido obviously won Ulster last year, won counties. Niamh Cunliffe won counties. They've been in Ulster club finals. So lost the last 2 finals, so it was good to kind of break the mould with this one and not lose. At least give them confidence. Yeah, absolutely. Because on paper, Guido do seem to, obviously we know about Kevin Cassidy and Oran McNeilish, but there's other guys like Darrell Boyle have kind of come to the fore for Donegal this year, and who's the other one? Missing out, Oran McFadden Ferry. So on paper they do look to have the stronger side with more county experience. The Limerick football finals on this weekend also. Newcastle West against Ula. So Ula would have there's a nice hurling, in terms of familiarity for the country. There's a nice bit of hurling sort of familiarity within that team, isn't there? Yeah, so they're basically sister clubs, Doon Hurling and Ula Football. And very interesting why this game hasn't taken place until now is because the Limerick Hurlers were on holidays in Barbados. Right. So Richie English is full forward for Ula, Darragh Donovan's midfield, and I think Pat Ryan plays in attack as well. And Barry Murphy, who would have played for the Limerick Seniors, he would have been involved, only I think he had a very serious injury this year. So basically, the semi-finals were at the start of the month, and you're probably looking at it going, why is there 3 weeks of a break? But I think they made the application and it was decided to hold off. But it's a massive thing for them. Haven't been in the final since 1980. Actually lost to Thomond College then. We're still going at that time in the Limerick Championship. Yeah, Pat Spahn would have played for them, I think, in the 70s, didn't he, when they won the All-Ireland club. So they're obviously the kind of novel aspect of it, and a lot of these guys would have played for Doon last year in the county senior hurling final, but Newcastle West probably the more experienced. The fact they've been in a final. They've been in 9 finals since Ula have been in one. They won 3, 2, and lost 4. And they won, I think they won 17 and lost 15, or could be the other round. Not completely sure there. So they do have that level of experience. But
be a brilliant story for those Limerick guys, hurlers guys, if they manage to carry on. Because I mean, if you think about it, like a decade ago, maybe going back a bit longer, there was a big culture of dual players in Limerick.
Yeah.
The footballers were going strong. Now it's kind of moved back towards kind of hurling only. But there is that kind of history of guys being good at one code and kind of excelling at the other as well.
Not to mention the great tens that those Ula boys are going to have come back from Barbados.
Yeah, the three lads.
The meet final is on this weekend, Rathote against Summerhill. So the crazy thing from Rathote's point of view is that they were a junior club just 7 years ago when they won that title. Then 2015 they won the intermediate to send them up senior, and Paul Keane did a piece with Conor McGill, who's the Meath full back, and he was going on about Rathote was a village of 1,000 people when McGill was born in the 1990s, and now there's 10,000 on the commuter belt.
So the interesting about that is that how many are actually from Meath. You know, this thing that places like Ashburn and Rathote on the border, people that talk about, like, you know, the Dublin people kind of living there. But it also points to, this is kind of the wider county argument, isn't it, when people say why aren't Dublin being challenged in Leinster, that the likes of Meath, Kildare, they don't lack the numbers when you see towns like that kind of exploding in population.
Yeah, because and like people would say, well, it's very hard to bring all that new population in together under one umbrella. Well, Dublin's had a huge population injection. They've made it work. But Brian McMahon would be a fairly key man there. I think people would have seen him play for Meath this summer. Excellent player. Eamon and Joey Wallace, who were both with Meath. And I'd say, like, a lot of people would wonder how have these two boys fallen off the county map. Maybe size is a factor, but their pace, you'd think, would be such an asset.
Pace was always a massive attribute, wasn't it? They both have been very good at athletics as well growing up. But like I think they supplied about 4 or 5 Rathote to the Meath under 3 team. They got to the Leinster final a couple of years ago, so there are a lot of guys there with county experience.
Summerhill, then, they were runners up for the last 2 seasons. Won it in 2013. They've beaten Rathote in the group stages, so there's not going to be any fear there. There's probably no fear at either side. But Kevin Ryan blasted a couple of goals in their win over Simonstown in the semi-finals. And of course, Simonstown haven't won it, wasn't it, back-to-back there a couple of years ago? Yeah,
Conor Nash would have obviously been the big one that would have come back for them, and they also had Shane O'Rourke involved, and you know, they hadn't won in a long time before then, you know, so that was obviously a massive one for them. Yeah,
Kildare final replay. Plenty of replays this weekend, as we've seen. Moorfield against Sarsfields. Just, I think it was Sarsfields. It was Barry Coffey was more or less the man of the match there. Very strong display from everything I read. Ray Cahill played well, and then on the other side for Moorfield, Mark McDermott and Éanna O'Connor, they got the goals. Would it be weird for Jack O'Connor to start playing his sons for Kildare?
I think it's probably Éanna is going to be the one that maybe there'll be a debate about, because, you know, obviously there was the talk a couple of years ago when they won the Leinster Club final and he was so prominent in that campaign, and they then lost to Corfin in the All-Ireland semi, and, like, you know, his place ball kicking is absolutely superb. He's kind of in the mould of that kind of Brian Sheehan style we were talking about earlier, like, you know, and slotting him over from the ground. There was kind of talk at the time, you know, I think he did get a bit, didn't he, kind of get O'Byrne Cup and maybe a couple of league appearances. But yeah, imagine it's going to be a bit of a dilemma for him to consider now, especially if he's another good run with the club over the next couple of weeks.
Wouldn't be like Kerry meant to come in and play his son for Kildare.
Yeah, well, it would be 2 decades on, history repeating themselves, yeah. And a South Kerry at that.
Tipperary semi-finals are on this weekend also. Lockmore, Castellini against Clonmel Commercials, so that's one of the semi-finals. And then J.K. Bracken's Templemore to people who don't know the area against Mile Rovers. So Lockmore beat Arvale fairly handily, 5-11 to 2-8 in their semi-final, while Clonmel beat the snot out of Ballyporeen 4-13 to 7 points. Michael Quinlivan is obviously the talk of the town in Clonmel anytime you talk about them, but he's heading away. Even though, like, it's kind of just came to the fore this week, it's been known for a few weeks.
Yeah, and I think it's something he's been considering for a good few while, and I think from what I understand, he would have kind of maybe let kind of lads in the squad know that this was probably going to be his last kind of county season, and that he'd been thinking about it for a while. It's fair enough. I mean, like a lot of these tip lads, he's based in Dublin, and, you know, fair commitment to be kind of to keep going to play senior for them.
To the far end of the county too, you know. It's
exactly,
not like in North Tip.
This is probably a really interesting game because Lockmore, the fact that they're gone out of the hurling with a couple of weeks, you imagine they're only going to get stronger than a football, because essentially it's both panels. I think it's pretty much, isn't it, 13 or 14.
It's not that long ago that they were double county champions.
Yeah. So, like, there are a few clubs in Tip, like the two of these, and Moyle in particular, seem to have kind of pulled away. But, you know, J.K. Brackens would have obviously, you know, good tradition, and probably the one that they probably just wish that they could field on Sunday is Colin O'Riordan. You know, we were talking about kind of guys come back from Australia to play a club championship, like Conor Glass named on the panel for Derry last Sunday. Imagine the boost that he put to their fortunes there to put him in midfield on Sunday for that.
Yeah, can you imagine if imagine if Colin Reardon stayed playing football for Tipperary and the likes of Atchison hadn't gone away and Seamus Kennedy was kept on the football side of things. Have a very strong team.
Yeah, because that was a band of kind of 4 or 5 really, really top class guys, and it's just not as easy to kind of replace them or kind of find guys up to that level.
It's even more crucial for Tipperary losing Michael Quinlivan, because next year the whole Division 2 and 3 scenario with Tier 2, Tip going down to Division 3, where there's some fairly stern competition with Cork down. I feel like there's one other
Derry there as well.
Very strong competition.
But also the way the draws worked out for them. You know what I mean? Like they're playing Clare in the first round. Like both sides will be eyeing that up. You know, like very little between them in their league currently over the last couple of years, especially this year when they met in Thurles. But then they'll probably be favoured, the winners of that, to beat Limerick or Waterford, and then you're into the Munster final.
And year 1 for David Power too. That, you know, it's not ideal. So JK Brackens, they beat Upperchurch 2-11 to 110 in the quarter final, whereas Mile Rovers beat Care 113 to 3-4. I think that's it. Otherwise, your brother, of course, is out this weekend. Tell us about that. Or do you want the tape to cover your mouth?
Well, I should follow the OurGame tradition of not talking about county finals that you have a bit of investment in. But yeah, Erogue were playing the county Premier Intermediate football final on Sunday against St Michael's. So both clubs are already gone up senior because of restructuring, which makes it a little bit different to usual, that everything's about going up senior. But obviously both want to go up as champions.
When did you last have championship silverware?
We would have won the intermediate in 14, so we would have come up that way. But like, they played each other every year for the last couple of years. Michael's have won the last couple of them. They have managed to get over the line in finals. So they'd be kind of the Blackrock wing, I suppose, the football wing of that club. And the fact that Blackrock got knocked out of the championship this year, like, you know, they're probably going to be very, very strong. So you just see how that goes. That's the curtain raisers of the senior final on Sunday.
And not to drill too deep in it, but Kieran Sheehan, he's back playing a little bit of football, but he's been out for so long. How old is he now?
He'll be 29. Yeah. So yeah, he came on in the semi-final. That would have been his first time playing for the club in about, I'd say, 5 or 6 years. He hadn't really been playing much in Australia over the last year. You know, he'd had a couple of injury problems. Well, he had a lot of long-term or serious injury problems when he was playing Aussie rules. Would have done his cruciate back in, I don't know, when he was playing with Cork anyway. So he's had a couple of difficulties, but yeah, he's kind of back involved. But like, there'd be a lot of high quality players. You know, St Michael's would have a good few guys who would have played underage football for Cork over the last couple of years. And a lot of guys who were kind of big players, so the Blackrock senior hurlers, will be involved with them as well. Like, you know, so
is there a determination from him to get the football career going again, Kieran?
I think he's just trying to get himself fit, and like as he said, I think he's come back at a good time for the club. Like, you know, in terms of getting to be involved in a panel for a county final. So probably going to be interesting. Like, you see this with a lot of guys who come back from the AFL. It's not as easy to kind of pick it back up. I mean, Tommy Walsh is probably the biggest example this year, wasn't he? We saw how good he was, but how it didn't kind of go as well from the first time around, and it's a big challenge for guys to come back and just slip seamlessly back into it, you know.
Even just a different type of turf. You're down in Australia probably on very firm ground the whole time. You come back here, the sludgy winter ground is very, very different. Right, that's it for Club Talk Football this week. Thanks to Fintan. If there's any stories we missed, please send them in to us at Shane Saint. What's your Twitter again?
FOTool13.
FOTool13. And don't forget to follow us on YouTube by clicking on that button just there.